how many of you make comic books in this room? We all know that making comic books, I believe, is like a miracle. You put your blood, you put your sweat, you put your whole entire soul in it. And a lot of times it's very lonely. You don't really get a chance to talk to people because, if you talk to a normal civilian, they're like, oh, you make comic books? What's that? You know what I mean? And if it's not, Superman, or if it's not, Batman, they sort of tend to not even think that's a real comic book. So the main reason why we made this panel, the other side of the table, is so we can open the door for everyone to ask questions to the best, to the diverse, and that's what we have today. We have, to my right, the mad scientist of fun, the creator of Curls webcomic, Legettes, Black Magic Tales, Sketch Before Sleep, Carolyn Belevsky. And to her right, the always wonderful, can I say New York Times bestseller?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can say it.
New York Times bestseller. Someone was honking, but the always lovely Miss Raina Telgemeier. So every single time, every single year, we do like to give away a whole bunch of goodies because it's just fun to give away free stuff. And we do have, what we're gonna do is each time I choose to, someone asks us a question, we'll do like a random drawing. I'm not gonna look. Well, it's hard, I can already see what they are, but we're giving away a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, I'll close my eyes. We're gonna give away something. We're gonna draw a piece of paper randomly whenever someone asks a question. And we're giving away, Carolyn, what are we giving away?
We're giving away lots of fun stuff. We're giving away Indie Comics magazine.
A chance to get Indie Comics magazine.
To win.
Random choosing.
We're giving away Raina's copy of Smile, and it's signed. Giving away Carnival Anthology. Really cool creators in here, like Kenneth Rockefort, Rafael Navarro, Elizabeth Wattison, and a whole bunch of other people that are comic strip artists, comic book artists, and a whole bunch of storyboard animators. And we have one ticket to Jay and Silent Bob, which is going on soon.
So just in case, you can still
Magic Bullet. And we have Dave Sims' Self-Publishing Guide, which is a very handy book if you don't already have it. I highly recommend reading it. And he sent it all the way over here from Canada. It's signed by Dave Sim, Raina, and myself.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So right now, we're going to answer any questions that you guys have. I'm going to ask the first question. I'm going to ask the first question. So yeah, you guys ready?
Let's go.
Let's do this thing. So basically, in professional wrestling, they basically have a phrase that says, perception is reality. So with your perspective on the comic book business, what is the perception of comics and what is the reality?
I'd say mainstream comics, like Joe mentioned before, Spider-Man, Batman, all that jazz. Basically, DC and Marvel is what people view comics. But in reality, comics is about storytelling, and it's about all types of storytelling. For example, if you get more into looking at indie comics, they can be about straight up anything. Like you can do cookbook, you can do diary comics, it's basically as open as an actual book that you think of in literary terms. So I feel like as indie publishers, I feel like we want to expose that to basically everyone. I'm not against superheroes in particular, it's just that in comic books that's what people think of mainstream. So I personally just want everybody to know that it's about telling a story.
Yeah, every time I go to the dentist or something, they ask me, so what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm an artist. What kind of art do you make? I make comic books. And they automatically go, oh, so you draw Batman. Or you draw Wonder Woman or something. And I'm like, no, it's more complicated than that. And they're like, well, what characters do you do? Have I heard of them? They also assume that your comics are probably on television somehow, because comics equals animation, which it is not. Comics are awesome in their own right. Yeah, so I feel like a lot of it has just been sort of breaking down people's assumptions and showing them that comics can be lots of different things and they can be different things for different people, and that the audiences are as varied as the people in this room and then some.
So let's introduce you, sir. Welcome.
Hi, I apologize for being late. My name is David Gallagher. I got caught up in apparently what was the Jay and Silent Bob line. I couldn't figure out. I was like, "Where's B? B? E? Oh my God!"
Welcome
So,
to
like,
Javits Center.
Yeah, it's crazy. So my apologies. My name is David Gallagher. I'm the author of High Moon, which is a werewolf western for DC Comics. I write Box 13, which is available as a digital comic through Comixology and as a trade paperback through Red 5. I've also written for Marvel Comics, Archaia, as well as Image Comics.
Wait a minute, we have one more person too.
Oh my goodness.
Look at this.
Yay.
Did you get caught up in the Jay and Silent Bob mess?
No, I was at 1A. I didn't know where 1B was. I found it now. So here I am, guys.
Yay!
Hey, Riley Brown,
Man, we got a good turnout.
the man of mystery himself.
Are these waters poisoned because we're late?
I hope so. Wait, that one's already, don't drink through the one.
That one might be.
I guess so. We'll start. Well, now we good. So we have to share 3 mics, or you two guys can share 1 mic.
All right. This is our penalty for lateness.
Yes,
This is
you
the
must-
guy's mic, and those are the girls'
Yes.
mic.
Well, he's got his mic too. So.
Yeah, that's right. Even though I don't know why. But basically, the question that I
Well,
posed
introduce Riley.
Riley. I want Riley to introduce Riley.
I can introduce
Oh,
Riley.
Can you, I want to hear other people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like Prince.
This is Riley Brown. He is the artist behind Power Play, which is a digital comic currently available on Comixology. Riley has also done work for Marvel Comics, including The Incredible Hercules, as well as The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yes. So the question I started out with these 2 ladies, and I'm going to pose this to you, is really perception. Perception is reality. What is the reality? What is the perception of comic books, and what is the reality? Honestly, between you 2.
Riley doesn't believe comics exist. No, between us 2. Well, I think that I've been involved in the comic industry for a long time in terms of, like, as far as my friends and family know. So, God, 12 years plus. And I majored in comics in college, so add another 4.5 years to that. So it's definitely like one of those things where people are like, what do you go to school for? Comics? How do you go to school for that? How do you get credit? I'm like, well, how do people get credit for watching films all day? Or how do people get credit for understanding the sociology of interactions between, so whatever. It's you can pick apart anybody's career or occupation or interest. I mean, oh, wow, what do you do? Build model boats? I mean, whatever. So a lot of people find it's really cool. Some people just have honest questions because they just don't know what it's like to either write a comic. They think, oh, you just fill in the balloons. I'm like, no, it's more like a screenplay or a stage play. So it honestly, the perception versus the reality for me is just people don't know. So that's the reality. And the perception is, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. For me, the perception versus reality aspect comes into play when people, like my friends will call me up to hang out, on a Thursday night, Friday night, something like that. And they'll be like, oh man, I'm working. They're like, but you don't have to be in an office. You make your own hours. You're an artist, right? You can do whatever you want. I'm like, no. When I make my own hours, it means I decide which 23 of the 24 hours in a day I am in the studio drawing. That last hour, I can do whatever I want. Usually I like to choose sleep. But, every now and then I can go out and meet with them. And it takes a long time to make a comic. It takes much longer to draw it than it does to read it. That's my reality.
Well, I think, it's something else I've noticed is that I because I'm not an illustrator, I also used to have a day job in addition to writing comics full time. So it was like 2 careers. So like I for people who don't know, I used to write all the advertising for the New York City Police Department. And I did that for 65 hours a week. And then I would come home after waking up at 4 in the morning, and I would come home at usually 6 or 7, spend an hour with my wife, and then go to the studio for the artist and work until 2 a.m, and then repeat that process. Repeat that process for a weekly comic I was putting out, and I did breaks. Obviously, I'd take like certain days off. Like I'd always give myself Saturday, but it was still like. But Sunday I worked, and Monday I worked, and it was still like the commute of going to work every day, work for the police, blah blah blah, and then coming back and be like, okay, hour, let's eat, let's go out to eat. All right, that's awesome. And then blah 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 blah. Oh, we're up to the studio. Blah blah blah. Work frantically. Oh, let's make sure these pages are done. Blah 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 blah. Send them off, and then and so
That's all great for your blood pressure.
I know, it's awesome, and your waistline.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is, as comics creators, we are killing ourselves for the fans. We are trying our best to do the best work we can, and it's not easy. So I hope you guys appreciate that.
All right, so let's.
We have a
Last time I was criticized for choosing people who only wear glasses, so you with the beard first. You have the first question.
Wait.
What?
What does it sound? It
That's
sounds
the
like.
next
Is it-
panel.
Is it Throne of Blood?
I have no idea. It's not written on my charts.
Okay. I just wasn't sure because it sounded like an adult film, and I wasn't sure.
That's
If
why-
we
in that room.
I was like,
It's just an X. That's
oh, gotcha. Okay.
So what's your question, sir?
If you were just starting out, either trying to get your own graphic novel going or trying to get your own webcomic going, what advice would you want to know that you know now that you'd like to tell yourself?
So basically,
Yeah, you should repeat the question.
now you made me completely forget the question. But basically,
While you were just starting out, what advice would you give?
yes. And we'll start with you, Carolyn.
What advice we didn't know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I would learn how to budget my time wisely.
Mm.
I mean, you think that you can just pick up a paper and draw a couple strips, and or you can draw Wolverine one time and you're golden. But it's not just that. It really requires, like David has said, a lot of discipline and scheduling out your day. I mean, I don't know what your personal schedule is, but even if you're working a 40-hour job, I would schedule that into play, schedule your commute into play, schedule how many hours you devote to family or other extracurricular activities that you do, and then try to find whatever else time that you have for comics, and that might invade your sleep. But try to do it on a workable, manageable time. I would lay out that as if it was a business, and make business hours for yourself, and say, this is my time. And I would arrange a studio and make everything as convenient as possible for yourself, so you don't have to worry about other things interfering with your comics time.
If you're talking about like launching a project or say starting a webcomic, starting a mini comic, I would make sure you have a little bit of a buffer. So if, for example, you're going to launch a webcomic that's updating 3 times a week, you want to have a couple of months worth of material before you actually launch, just because having some back end is nice, and sort of knowing what your pacing is going to be like, and what your personal comfort level as far as how, like Carolyn said, how many hours a day you're going to be putting into it. Those are things you will start to feel out as you have launched the webcomic or as you have started publishing something, but having a little bit of buffer, it's a good way to begin, so that you don't say, I'm going to update 3 times a week, and then realize you can only update once a week. You kind of want to figure that out in advance.
Yeah, those are both really good points. It's time management is a huge thing, and that's something that they don't, like, I went to college for illustration. We didn't have much actual business training. Like, as a cartoonist, as an illustrator, you're also essentially your own business. You're your own boss, your own employees, the whole thing. And that's something a lot of times people don't emphasize enough, that you have to run the whole company. And when Marvel hires you or DC hires you or whatever, they're not actually hiring you. They are subcontracting you to create their comic book for them. And so they're just hiring your company, which is you. So yeah, time management is a huge thing. Like setting up, like Carolyn was saying, setting up time for your family, making sure you have that time to spend, time to do the laundry, time to do whatever regular chores. Like time management is a huge skill that you really gotta focus on.
I think that I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think the for me, the most important lesson I learned was how important is this to me? Because if it's not important to me, and this is sort of what I had to do, it wasn't just time management for me, it was prioritizing. It's like, what is the most important thing for me? Well, family, food, comics. So, but sometimes you just sort of have to shuffle that, and work and income. So what I noticed is in my day-to-day, it's like, oh, I'd work, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I'd be like, oh, but I'm too tired to work on my comic today. It's been just a really hard day, and oh my God, so much stress. Well, then what I noticed is at the end of the day, outside of the schedule I earlier told you guys, when I was working for the NYPD, but what I had noticed is I'm really fresh in the morning. And if I do my comic when I wake up and put in the hours when I wake up, then for the rest of the day, I don't have to worry about, oh, did I do my comic today? I'm too tired to. So that was, I made that the first thing I did after I kissed my wife, ate my breakfast, took a shower. I was at my desk writing about what I wanted my comic to be. And when I worked in a restaurant when I was in high school, one of the things they always said that I thought was really important was, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, or if you're not making your comic, you should always be working in service of your comic. So while I'm at the show, I'm not working on comics, but I'm working in service of that comic. I'm supporting the business I'm creating is helping me do more comics. So there's the creative time, and then there's the actual time to allow you to have more creative time. Because if you don't make the convention appearances and don't meet the people and don't arrange your assignments, you'll find yourself with less creative time because you have to work at a restaurant or McDonald's or whatever. So it's just being mindful of how important this is to you. And that's a lesson that in 12 years I've really had to remind myself of. If it's really important for me to be a comic creator, and it is really important for me to be a comic creator, I need to take it very seriously.
All right, let's see what you won.
Close your eyes.
Here, you say it.
You want a copy of Magic Bullet?
Yay!
For those of you that don't know, Magic Bullet is put together by some local Washington, D.C. creators. And we put together, everyone gets a one-page newspaper-style print comic. And that's something that even you guys can do if you organize a local chapter of local other artists and cartoonists around your area. And you can put together either an anthology or a newspaper or some type of pamphlet that gets your name out to everybody, even especially local. I find that if you build your name local, you start to get all these connections within the local media too.
Local support can be huge because that's your friends, or the restaurants you go to. Local papers love talking about people that live in their town doing cool things. So, and we all started off doing local indie anthologies. So.
Yes.
Okay, sir with the glasses. I'll take mine.
So, you've got your comic made. You've decided that you're going to New York Comic Con. You've sent your check off for your booth. What are your first considerations for setting up and preparing for the show?
How do you prepare? What are your best ideas to prepare for a big
Preparing
show?
for a convention.
I have. It depends. I ask myself personally whether I want to make a presence or whether I want to make a profit. Depending on the show, I make the determination, okay, well, this is a small show, and I really want people to know what it is, or I really want to make a lot of money. Because, and those are at every show, I ask myself, do I want people to know about my webcomics, so I give away free flyers and free things and free this and free that, or do I want to make a lot of money? Because my goal and what I bring is totally different. For an example, a few years ago when High Moon came out, we gave away at the front of the convention free blank wanted posters. You would bring up the wanted poster to our table, we would give you a free sketch, turn you into a wanted convicted criminal, Now our URL for our webcomic was at the bottom. So it said wanted, blah, 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 for crimes against blah, 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 blah. And it said highmooncomic.com, learn more, blah, blah, blah. And then it was an original piece of art that somebody was personally invested in. And they took it up and they thought it was really cool. And it drove a tremendous amount of traffic to our site. And we made a big presence and we didn't sell anything. But we came out of that show with people, the percentage of traffic spike that we got was, over 4,250%. So, it was substantial. Whatever. It was a webcomic online. People can read it. But the amount of people that we drove to the site and created that brand presence was huge. We want to make a profit. Okay, well, we bring a money box, bring plenty of books, bring a little square fob for your iPad so you can take credit cards. It's a different set of mentality. So, it depends. That's the answer to the question. For us, it depends on those two things. But
I think if you're just sort of dabbling and you are just like, I don't know if I want to make profit or if I want to make a presence, or you want to make both, I want to say having a little bit of everything is good, but sometimes that can backfire. What having a little of everything means to me is having like a business card and maybe a button, like something that's in the $1 to $5 price range, and then you've got your books, which are perhaps in the $5 to $10 price range. You can have t-shirts, which are in the $20 price range, and then if you're selling original art, that can be a couple of $100s sometimes, depending on what you're selling. And so, but having too much on your table can sometimes overwhelm the audience.
Table space is definitely at a premium.
Yeah.
You learn, your first convention, you're gonna make, it's not gonna be your best convention. You learn every time. But like you were saying, hitting different price points. You want to have the cheap thing for like $5 and less, which for me is usually like, a comic book, just, single issues. Well, you want to have a free thing, because people love free crap.
Like a flyer.
Like a flyer, a business card, something like that. $1 to $5 comic book. Then prints will be $10 to $25 or whatever. Then, maybe like a simple commission of, like a head sketch or something for $50. $100 for like a full page, something or other. Then original artwork is more than that. You just figure out your audience, what kind of market it is, what kind of people come to you, and you want to make sure you have something for everybody.
And
Can I say something?
Absolutely. Hello, this is Larry Martyr, who is the creator of Beam World up in the front.
Hey.
So.
My comment is that what we're selling when we're sitting behind the table is a story. Not our comic books, the story about the interaction with us. And be it, for 26 years I've been giving away free Bean World action figures, which are little lima beans with eyes on them. But the most important thing is because we all know collectors, and collectors love to tell the story about how they collected this thing. I learned this from the gallery world 40 years ago, that what it's really about is when somebody buys an expensive piece of art, they put it up on their wall, and what they want to do is they want to tell the story about how they acquired that piece of art. What we are selling as we sit there is, what we are creating is the story about ourselves that people can then go and retell and retell and retell. It's a really important thing to do.
Right. As a creator behind the table, people are going to ask you all weekend, so what are you selling? Or what's your book about? And you need sort of a snappy spiel, not too long, not too short, not too annoying for your table neighbors who are going to have to hear it again and again all week.
Another thing is, I think it's really good to have like small trinkets and things that are $1 or $2. But then on the other hand of it, you can go a little crazy mentally, being like, I want to do shirts and this and that, and like just so you know, with shirts. Those are very hard to sell. Like I know that like when you have your first idea and you want to go all crazy with it, just beware that people are here for comics and fun pop culture stuff. They're not necessarily here to buy a shirt. They're not, thinking about shopping. So unless the t-shirt is very, very striking, I wouldn't go that way, especially on your first convention and no one knows who you are. So, it's good to keep it in mind for future reference. But at the same time, like really focus exactly on your story. As far as that books and like being yourself is also very important. Like you are your own brand if you really think about it. I mean, a lot of like major I know this sounds kind of hokey, but like major personalities that we know of in media, like be it Kevin Smith or Martha Stewart, like anybody who's a household name, they are who they are because of that brand. And I think that that sets them apart. And even with some comic creators, there's certain people that you know because of a certain story behind them, and that makes complete sense. So,
And
all right.
you won a free print at Girl Studio, table B16.
Woo!
That's you, sir. He passed two notes. Just pass this to him. Who's
Thank
next?
you.
You all the way back in the red, no beard.
I want to go back actually to a comment that was made before about the time that you spend basically on your comic itself and the time you spend doing the in-service of your comic activities. And I'm curious to get a sense of how much of your time you spend on each of those, because I don't know if it's, and how you kind of prioritize and manage the different activities. Do you spend 50% of your time going after the marketing and the branding and all those pieces and 50% on the other? How do you guys balance those pieces?
For me, I'll set a day aside for marketing. That's going to be the day of the week that I'm just going to email everybody I can, fill out the, if there's like a email interview that I have to do, update the blog or program the blog to auto-update itself. I'll just spend a whole day doing that, get that out of the way for the week. And then, because the majority of my time I spend actually producing the comic. So that's the way I try to, have clear, like this day is for this thing, so I don't get distracted.
Whereas I do a little bit of everything, but I'll do the creative part first, because that's the part that requires the most energy. If it's tweeting to people 15 minutes a day at the end of my workday that, oh, by the way, I just finished the coolest page ever, woot woot. Yeah, exactly. So I do that, but I do that stuff. The stuff that requires the most energy and the most focus is the creative stuff for me. And everybody's different, obviously. And then at the end of that period, I set aside time and say, okay, well, I need to update my Facebook, my Twitter, my blog, send out the press releases, find out what the diamond order number is, make sure I've written the check for New York Comic Con table. But some of that stuff is easy. Writing a check doesn't take that much time. Figuring out what my characters are going to do between this page and that page, oh my God. So the difference is what requires the most effort. And the things that require the most effort, do that first. And then that's off your plate. And then do the next thing that requires the most effort. Until writing a check at the end doesn't require anything to write a check and put it in the mailbox. So that's how I do it. Other people work differently.
I work exactly the opposite. I have to get all the distracting stuff out of the way on my day. Like before I can sit down at my desk, I have to put the check in the mail and I have to go to CVS and get whatever. But I had a quote from somebody in the book world recently who said, "You have to remember that you're a writer first and an author second." Which I've sort of taken with me as meaning, you really need to worry more about working on your books before you should be talking about your books. And when you get to the level where you're working with a publisher, I work for Scholastic, which is a huge children's publisher, so...
Also, congratulations.
Yeah, seriously.
Thanks. I got an Eisner Award this summer. It was awesome. Thanks. And it's been a journey. I mean, Smile was a mini comic, and I was making mini comics before I was publishing with a large publisher. But the up trajectory of my career has been that now I spend a lot of time at schools and libraries and conventions talking to kids. And for me, it's really easy to get distracted by all of what goes into that, which just means answering emails and then traveling and getting my presentations ready for these things and then interacting with people. And it's very easy for me to let that take over and for my brain space to be completely such that when I get back from a week of doing something like that, it takes me a week to recover before I can start to work again. And I have to remember that that's not the way it should be and that I should be working more than I am putting my personnel self out there. I don't know. I could ramble on for a long time about this, but this past year has been spent at my desk first and foremost, and I think the balance is probably like 60-40. Like I work 60% of the time on comics, and then the other 40% is devoted to not only family meals and sleeping, but also to correspondence and tweeting. But I do like to tweet. I like it a lot.
All right, you won. Hey, you won Dave Sim book.
Hey,
Congratulations.
While I walk to send this. Oh.
so
Dave Sim?
yes.
All right, so we all signed. All right, picked it up
You have to sign
afterwards.
Dave Sim's book?
What?
Afterwards.
You left yours
Publishing
all
book,
space.
so-
What?
Sign it.
Okay.
All right, so this gentleman right here in the hat.
Oh, nice. Look. Oh, brilliant. I probably have to draw a picture. Terrible.
But so remember at the end of this to come pick that up.
You don't know.
Are you standing for this? Yeah, go ahead, stand.
Go
man.
for it.
Just for everybody on the panel, I wanted to know what all of your big breaks, I guess, were, and what steps you took to get there, whether it be your first published book or being commissioned by Marvel.
Oh, man. That's tough.
Well, I'm still waiting for my
Yeah.
book. I know that the future is gonna, there's gonna be more stuff in the future. That's why I believe 2012. I don't believe in that right now because I know that there's more in the future for all of us.
2013 is going to be a good year.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. 2012 is going to be awesome.
Yeah. So, I can't really mention like one thing that like I feel like I'm still pretty young. I can't really
Best you can do.
mention one thing in my life that I would say that is like the tipping point of like my career right now. But I will say like in the past couple of years, like I have seen a tremendous growth in my art overall. So I would like just commend that to being drawing almost every day. Like one project I did that almost anyone in here can do, even if you're a writer, you can translate this to more writing. But I did this project I called Sketch Before Sleep, and I like told myself I'm gonna commit to drawing one square illustration every night on my digital tablet, and I'm gonna do that every night for 365 days, and I did that. And like that's something that anyone can do if you're a writer. Write for 15 minutes a day, and just make goals for yourself, make projects for yourself. So I feel like that really leads you to a path that you are constantly creating. There's no stagnant days or time periods. So as far as like, I really honestly can't pick like one thing that's like my breakout. I haven't won an Oscar yet or anything, or an Eisner or an Oscar, or whatever. I can't say that anything is my breakout role, but and I don't think I ever honestly could. So, but I definitely like think that everyone on this panel like has done something great in the past couple of years. So I mean, even like I started adding some digital like emphasis on this panel this year because I really think that that's where things are headed. So yeah, I think Raina has some major announcements for this year, of course.
I do.
Or like announcements of like what you've done the past year.
Well, as far as like starting out and going from doing it as a hobby to doing it as a professional, I had been making mini comics. Gosh, I was probably 17 when I made my first mini comic, but so I had been doing it for a good 10 years before a publisher saw what I was doing. But the way that I got my publisher's attention was I was exhibiting at conventions. I was selling mini comics at conventions. I went to San Diego Comic-Con. I did MoCA here in New York. I was doing SPX down in DC, Ape in San Francisco. I was just kind of everywhere selling my minis. And editors from book companies come to these things and they're looking for talent. So if you guys have tables at this convention, I hope you've got stuff that you can hand to people when they're just like, so what do you got? Business cards, comics, etc. Because you never know who's here. And the first project that I did professionally with Scholastic was to adapt the Babysitter's Club into graphic novel format.
So good.
This from a man. Oh, awesome. But that was back when the only comics for girls that were really on the shelves at Barnes & Noble were manga. And at first people were like, this is not a manga. I don't really know what to make of this. Also, it's for girls, and I'm a man, so why should I? I don't know. It was an interesting experience, but I did 4 of them, and that led to me being able to do creator-owned stuff for Scholastic, which has been great. There's probably other stuff that happened at some point, but I'm going to let other people talk now.
My big break came just going to comic book conventions getting a table, hanging out with friends of mine, and just having, I set myself up. I acted like a professional, taking commissions, selling whatever, mini comics, small press comics that I'd done. Because then, like, when I'd meet an editor, I could tell him, oh yeah, I'm at table such and such in Artist Alley, and they'd be like, oh, okay, so this guy, I could see it on their face. Because, I was 24 when I first, was breaking into the industry. So I was pretty young, and...
That's 26.
Yeah. And so, like, I could see in their face, they're like, oh, wow, okay, this guy's already organized, he's got a table. And my first big break was, I just got it from being in a portfolio review line for Marvel. I just brought my stuff up. The line wasn't very long, and I was like, okay, you know what? I might as well check it out, because I'd been in portfolio review lines before. They get kind of, it can be kind of a downer when you wait forever, talk to a dude for 5-10 minutes, and he doesn't, he's not that impressed or whatever. But I was like, okay, the line's not that long, we'll see what I'm made of. And so I sit down, show them my stuff, and they liked it, And a week later, they called me up to do, to see if I was available to do the Marvel Holiday Special for 2005. And once I did that, which was a great comic because all of the characters appear for the Christmas special, and so it was like the perfect portfolio piece. And once I did that, then they just, they liked my stuff, and they kept giving me more work. Started off with a couple of fill-in issues for Cable and Deadpool, and turned into taking the comic book over till I was writing it and drawing it at the very end. So that, was my biggest break, and that's kind of allowed me to, and after working for Marvel for a few years, that's allowed me to now break off and do my own creator-owned thing, Power Play, which just came out on Wednesday, so go download it.
Yeah. So, I was actually a neurobiologist.
That's how you start out in the comic
He's
industry.
not joking.
I'm not actually kidding. So I was a neurobiologist, and I was looking to make a change. So I had foolishly drawn my resume as a 6-panel comic strip and faxed it to Marvel Comics. The next day, a day and a half later, I got a call from one of the coordinating people in HR, Maria Campbell, and she said, hey, I see you've got these things on your resume, and you drew your comic strip that takes a lot of gumption. How would you like to work for Marvel Interactive? They need a part-time intern kind of thing. So I was like, whoa, I didn't know anything about the comic industry. I was just like, I just always wanted to do this. So I lived in Maryland at the time, gave up everything I had, went to Marvel, lived in Queens in a $400 apartment, and essentially was their intern for, every day for over a year. Until the work I had done had really earned me a position to work in other departments and learn the comic book industry from the inside out, sort of. I mean, a lot of people that I know break in from the outside in. They're like, oh, I'm an outsider, I don't know anything about it, I want to show my portfolio until I break in. Whereas I was like, I want to go in this way and learn everything I can about how a comic's made, editorially, how a digital comic is made, and what the legal ramifications are, and how creative services works, and all the aspects of the industry. So that was my big break. I mean, I worked in Marvel in 1999 and learned, and the skills I learned there were how to make digital comics. We were making digital comics and motion comics, 12, 13 years ago. And so, anyway, and from there, after I left Marvel in 2002, I started to learn how you make your own comics, and I made my own comics. My first one was like a neo-noir detective story based on an old-time radio, whatever. But I printed my own comic and eventually just made more and more comics until I got the attention of a smaller press company. And years down the line, those small steps all paid off, because now the digital experience I learned in '99 taught me how to do digital comics today, and the print experience I learned working in the indie industry, like doing small little mini comics and blah blah blah, like that taught me how pre-press works and digital pre-press and how lettering works and how these aspects work, because I found that aspect of knowing a little bit about how comics works, just not in a business sense, but in a sales and promotion and marketing sense, really gave me the components to be successful. And I think that really came out when I made my big break for High Moon, which is a werewolf western I do, which won a Harvey Award a couple of years ago. So it's been a fun process, but again, it's a little bit of everything in that path to being a success.
Yeah, I think it's a whole path, because it's also about like just being here. Like you just being in this panel is already like a success in a way, because just showing your face and like being out, like no one's gonna know if you're at home or in your basement drawing comics.
Showing up to the party's half the battle.
Yeah.
Now, I did pre-draw, and you did win the Indie Comics magazine.
Congratulations.
Can we pass that too?
Please call the guy in the mask.
I knew you were going to raise your hand. Mr. I don't know what I'm going to call you.
I just wanted to ask a serious question. We danced around the subject, but how do you deal in the comics business with people in your life, wives, girlfriends, brothers, sisters, who have no clue of what you're doing and really don't take what you're doing seriously and think that this is a hobby or this is something you should be doing on your time and not on their time type of thing? How do you deal with that kind of a pressure in your family life?
That's a totally valid thing. That's something that, like I was mentioning before, people don't understand. Like, oh yeah, you make your own schedule. You can do whatever you want. You have to set your hours. You have to say, like my friend and writer on several of my Marvel things, Fred Van Lente, he works from 9 to 5. Like that's it, and in that time, that's where he does his writing. Afterwards, he stops. And so his editors know not to bother him afterwards, so he has time for his family and video games. And his family and video games know not to bother him between the hours of 9 and 5. And that's really important. For myself, I work longer hours than that, and it's more like it's easier for me to just focus on one thing a day. So for myself, Mondays and Wednesdays and usually Fridays, unless there's something really big going on, that I'm just working all day from 9 in the morning till 10 or 11 at night, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays I'll work till 6 or 7, and those are the days I spend with the girlfriend, or if the parents are in town, I'll hang out with them. But it's just, you have to have those hours and say, this is when I'm at work. And another, as far as taking it seriously, and if it's a hobby or not a hobby, I mean, it's, ever since the beginning, it's been my profession. It's been my job. I do make money doing it. So, that's just the reality of it. I don't have a second job. At first I worked part-time, and I always made sure that I only worked part-time because I always wanted to make sure I did have time for comics. But if you have a full-time job, just set a more realistic schedule for yourself. Figure out how much time you can spend and how many hours you can put into it every day or every week. And, maybe at first you just want to treat it like a hobby. Just, you only say, okay, I have 1 hour today to do it, and so that's what I'm going to do. Or 1 day a week to do it, and that's what I'm going to do it. And then when you build up enough, kind of backlog it till you are ready to, you have like, if you could do 1 page, honestly, if you do 1 page a week of a comic, at the end of the year you'll have 52 pages, which is actually a lot more pages than most independent comic people do in a week, or in a year. And they are stressing themselves out because they're just not organized. So, that's the answer.
Yeah, I'm for the most part, in my adult life, every woman I've dated has been understanding. I've been in the comic industry essentially for as long as, aside from when I was a neurobiologist. Comics has been my career. It's how I've made my money. So if they say, well, comics are stupid and comics are dumb, or I don't understand, well, if I don't write this comic, I will die because I won't eat.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is when I got my very first, I'll tell you this story, when I got my very first check for the very first story I ever published. It was for $500. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is like play money. So, not thinking and being very excited that I got a check, I photocopied it, I framed it, I went to the bank, I cashed it, and I bought a new TV. That was also the money that was my rent. But I was so excited, I was so blinded by the fact, like, oh my goodness, this is my first check, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. No, literally, now comics aren't like a fun little hobby that happens to pay on the side. Comics are how I need to make my rent, eat my, if I do not write comics, I do not live. Literally.
But also, I wouldn't really be concerned about some of the people that might say something. Like, when it comes down to it, it's your life, and if that's what you really want to do, I mean, as long as you're totally not alienating, everyone, but I would, they should be concerning of you. If they care about you, then they should know this is something you're really passionate about, and they're good people. And if they're really going to be that horrible of friends, then maybe they're not good friends, and they don't deserve to be in your life.
Loved ones are a little bit different than immediate friends, I found, and sometimes the loved one dance can be delicate. Sometimes you're not spending enough time with me dance is delicate.
You could do what I did and marry a cartoonist.
You can do what I did and also marry a cartoonist.
So that's marry a cartoonist.
Yeah.
No, I already drew for him.
Yeah.
This is awesome because he won Smile.
Awesome.
Perfect fit.
Perfect, I know, right?
I'll run it
Yeah.
while I'm choosing this you, sir, in the black.
First, this is a great spirit to be here with you. I am from Venezuela.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Wow.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
coming all this way.
Okay?
Just for this panel?
Yeah.
How?
And which artists are your influence? You treat they like your masters, like your teachers.
I will tell you that one artist that has taught me more about writing than any other artist is John Buscema, who literally as a writer taught me, he's not a writer, he's an artist, but he taught me as a writer how to think visually. Because a lot of comics are a visual medium. So as a writer, you don't want your artists to be bored by what you're writing. You want them to be excited. You want them to get the script and be like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to write. Oh my god, this is going to be so good to draw. I can't wait. Yeah. So, and literally I've had artists call me up and be like, oh my god, this is so cool. John Buscema and Will Eisner as a writer are my biggest influences, and their art conveys a lot of what I try to tell in the stories that I give my artists.
I'm always influenced. Every time I see a new drawing or something that I really like, I get influenced by it. I have so many influences, I wouldn't even know where to start. I guess my main influences, I would say, probably, I'd have to go back to when I was 12 or 13, when I was first, really getting crazy about comic books and loving that type of art style. I think a lot of people, when they're that age, are when they really, start to get into it. And for me, it was Jim Lee and the artwork in the Mega Man instruction booklets. So now, those two things, man, when I was 11 and 12 years old, I would copy all my X-Men comics, and I would copy all the Mega Man instruction books, and I loved that stuff. And those are two so very different art styles. And I would go back and forth, my art was all over the place. And so I kind of slowly over the years realized what it is that I liked about each of those. I liked the Mega Man stuff because it was expressive, it was fun, all the characters had their own personalities and they were great. What I liked about Jim Lee's stuff was that he had tall, statuesque, heroic looking figures, they were dynamic, I liked all the details and the cross-hatching and the line work and all that stuff, and I thought that was great. And so over the years, so many different artists I've seen since that have influenced me in different ways, I've learned different things from them. But now, if I were to describe my style, I would say that I always say I like the full range of character and emotion. So I can do a Jim Lee X-Men type action scene, but then also have a goofy Mega Man type of personality at the same time. And that's been a big part of most of my projects. If you look at my Deadpool stuff, my Hercules stuff, and my current Power Play stuff. It's all about the action and the comedy and the personality coming through.
I'll just choose one. I'll choose Calvin and Hobbes
Oh,
because
wonderful.
Calvin and Hobbes is the best thing ever. It's just,
Very true.
with a side order for better or for worse. I think that's my clearest stylistic influence. But Calvin and Hobbes is still like my favorite comic in that it's funny, it's well drawn, it's got so much motion and so much life, and all it is ink on paper, but it's still magical.
Since we don't have much time, I'll just run through really quick. For me, it's Chuck Jones and anything Warner Brothers inspired ever since from a young age. And also anything animated, really. I'm really drawn to that. And as far as writing goes, Gene Shepard. If you don't remember him, he did A Christmas Story.
Oh, wow.
And so all of his old radio shows are great too. So I really think he's a master storyteller. So Chuck Jones and Gene Shepard would be two.
And our friend gets the box 13.
Yay!
So, just one last question, and I've been choosing anyone from the back, so you miss.
Thank you very much.
You could. No, you with the hat. Riddler girl, yeah.
Process question. When you're creating any stories or when you're doing your projects, do you plan out your storytelling short story wise per event, or do you have like a main point where you're like, okay, this is where I want to go, and this is where I'm gonna end up, and everything else is just an adventure in between?
I draw a map. I make it very easy for myself. I think, okay, well, how big is this project going to be? Is it going to be 60 pages? Is it going to be 22 pages? Is it going to be 18 pages? Whatever. Well, then I draw a map, and then I quite literally, draw a number, write the numbers 1 through 20, and each on those, and then I write down, okay, page 1, this happens, page 2, this happens, page 3, all the way until I get to 20, and that lets me figure out where my act structure is going to be, and where the characters are going to do crazy things, and this is going to be a crazy cliffhanger, this is going to be this. But I literally, it's like when you came to the Javits Center, you probably had a map. You probably used your little iPhone or Google Maps to figure out how do you get here. That's exactly what I did. And sometimes there will be roadmaps and diversions where you're like, I totally didn't mean for the character to do this, but oh my god, the story's so awesome this way. But yeah, I literally start out with a map, and that map helps me visualize where the characters and the story are going to start and where it's going to end. And it might be a little bit different along the way, but that's what I do. Other people might be different.
I feel like I kind of construct my story. I start with the beginning and the end, and I figure out, okay, like in the first 3 pages, I sort of stick to like a 3-act structure with like an opening and an epilogue. So, I'd have 5 pages dedicated to the first act, 10 pages to the second act, 5 pages to the final act, and then a 2-page epilogue, or 1 page at the beginning, 1 page at the end, depending on how I want to do it. And then within each of those acts, I know, okay, I have to jump through this hoop, and this hoop to get to where I want to go. And then I start thumbnailing. I start drawing and saying, okay, how much space, here's a scene I really want to put in, or I really have to put in, or it's integral to the story. How much space does it actually need? How many panels does it take? How many panels can I fit on a page? And and how does it all fit together? And then after that, I'll kind of like, as I'm sort of drawing it, kind of dialogue will pop up in my head, and then I will, I don't dialogue that often because usually I'm working with a writer, but even then I'll come up with suggestions. And after I have sort of the whole thing planned out, then I go back in and finalize the dialogue and make it sound good.
Up until my most recent project, which I'm working on right now, it's another book coming from Scholastic next year, I would just sort of sit down and start to thumbnail and see where things went. not having any clue about page count, but I wasn't working with like the comic book format, which is always going to be 24 pages long, slightly shorter in story because there's got to be corn nuts ads and stuff. But when you're making graphic novels, I was just like, well, I don't really have a page count set, so I'll just start to work. I would start with a list sometimes of like, I know this is what needs to happen in the story, and I was making autobio comics predominantly too, so I was starting with my own life as sort of the template for the stories. And luckily, when you're working with your own life stories, you're like, well, I know how this thing ended. So endings have always been my struggling point. Endings are extremely difficult for me. But sometimes if you just start working, the ending will sort of present itself, or you'll realize that you can end it without really ending it, which is wonderful. But the book that I'm working on now, I did sit down and write an outline for myself. And that was me actually working on a computer instead of just sitting down with a pencil and paper and sort of following my muse. So I thought I outlined it, and then I broke that down into thumbnails, much like he was saying, and then my editors actually edit my thumbnails, like they edit from that stage of the game. Yeah, I try to make them as clear as possible so that they're legible.
Yeah.
Do your editors edit your thumbnails?
Some editors like to do it that way. Sometimes I give them thumbnails. It depends on the deadline. If you run a deadline, if you run a deadline like close enough to the end, they let you get away with anything because they're just happy to have it.
But,
don't tell my editors I said that.
I never heard that. That's why I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I don't really have one way that I work. I work in all sorts of different ways, but it's working for me.
For me, with my Curls comic strip, I basically kind of like Raina, really work organically. Like I'll do thumbnails, and I sometimes don't even know where the story's gonna go, but sometimes I might have certain punchlines for certain strips. But I do keep a notebook with me all the time to jot ideas down, or even on. Like, sometimes I'll take little pieces of paper and I'll write down the idea really quick and then keep them together, and then I'll rewrite them in my notebook, so I have them all in one notebook. It's some crazy perspective of doing that, but yeah. But I really think that anytime you get an idea, even if you think it's stupid, write it down.
Write it down.
You might forget, or even if you think it's a great idea, you're like, oh, I'm gonna, remember this always because it's the most brilliant idea ever, and then you forget it tomorrow.
Oh my God. I have this list. I have like a text file on my phone that just says ideas.
I have one of those too.
Yeah, I have several of them because I always just start a new list.
Oh.
And one of them I pulled up the other day, and it said, what was it? Brain tumor in the shape of the Virgin Mary. That's it. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that, but I thought that was a brilliant idea for something.
And with that, what was that? Brain tumors in the
The shape of the Virgin Mary.
With that concludes our panel. Thanks everyone for joining us. Brain tumors in the shape of the Virgin Mary. Take that home.
Awesome.